We're so glad you've joined us to improve your knowledge on infant mental health. Your commitment to improving the outcomes for the 0 to 3-year-old population is a central aspect in transforming lives across the state of New Mexico. In this video, you will learn about 3 components of infant mental health: infant mental health teams, evidence-based practices, and provider capacity building.
I had not planned to have children. My husband and I had not planned to have children, and then we had one. It was a really hard adjustment for us in the beginning, and so I feel like there were things that maybe could have been happening when he was a baby that weren't happening because there was so much else happening. And then when he was older and we were in speech therapy, that was going well, but there just was like kind of this missing piece that just didn't seem like it was there, and I didn't know what it was, but I was having a lot of frustration and not really knowing what to do differently, but I knew that we didn't really have the kind of relationship that I wanted us to have.
My partner and I, we got a 15-month-old nephew that was looking for a home. And so we took him in on the conditions of fostering and possible adoption, if the parents weren't able to reunify. Anyway, so that didn't happen. So we're in the adoption process. And through our process, we started to recognize issues that we were given a little insights through CYFD and training to recognize certain issues. And we started to recognize them, so we sought help.
Raising children can be one of the most important and fulfilling parts of one's life. But despite the image created by mass media about a perfect family, raising children even in the best circumstances is never easy. Caregivers are required to be patient, learn from their babies, and create a bond. When caregivers bond with their child, the infant forms an attachment. A securely attached infant has an increased capacity to deal with the many challenges and risks that they will face in their lifetime. Alternatively, caregivers and babies who lack this bond and attachment will be at much greater risk to themselves and others, perpetuating an intergenerational cycle plagued with pain, abuse, and neglect. Critical brain, social, physical, and emotional development happens before a child turns 3. During this time, infants and babies require the love, bond, and care from their caregiver to develop at a healthy rate and become increasingly more capable of dealing with risk factors. Most maltreatment happens to children between the ages of 0 and 3. Maltreatment has greater negative effects on children at younger ages. As a result of this trauma, children are more likely to suffer from neurobiological and psychosocial effects, and also more likely to face increased health risks. In children and adolescents, this can manifest as brain abnormalities, stress disorders, and substance abuse. This trauma and associated risk factors in infancy affect the general lifespan of an individual. Long-term consequences of trauma in infancy, compounded with developmental challenges, can include substance abuse, PTSD, cancer, and suicide. These adults also face social problems such as homelessness, unemployment, and difficulties parenting. This next generation in turn faces similar adversity and trauma, and the cycle is established. Over the course of their lifetime, each individual costs an average of $1.8 million to the U.S. economy and $5.9 trillion to the U.S. as a whole. But more importantly, this intergenerational cycle has played a major role in the decline in health and wellness of families in the U.S. But what if we told you the effects of trauma could be addressed at a very early stage, changing patterns and beginning to heal the intergenerational trauma, making a change for future generations?
Right. I remember when I first moved to New Mexico, I was working at the outpatient clinic at UNM, Children's Psychiatric Center. And, they were kind of like, well, what's this infant mental health stuff you do? And they were like allowing me to see babies under 3. But my supervisor said to me one day, I guess I kind of have a hard time justifying assigning you an 18-month-old when I have a kid who's 16 who just tried to kill his mom. That kid has more acute need. And on one hand, I get that, right? You got to deal with that problem. That kid was in the hospital, but going to get released, and somebody needed to see that case. But what I said to him is, we want this 18-month-old not to ever become that child. And so, I think that that's part of what we also need, those voices who can tell those stories and get the resonance when you have these really acute needs, often in juvenile justice, around kids that are doing really terrible things, and prevent it. And then how do we document? That's the other real challenge that I think is the way for our future, is how do we begin to collect the data and do the studies to actually demonstrate that if we intervene at 18 months, if we intervene at birth, if we can do the prevention work, we might not see as many kids in this state at 16 who need to be in the hospital because they got so aggressive, that they almost hurt their parents.
Perhaps the most important message for young parents, for new parents, is the message, babies remember. The parts of the brain that register pain and fear are fully mature by 1 year of age, and they are almost completely mature when the baby is born. So 2 and 3 day old babies are already responding to the tone of voice of the people around them. And they already are startled when they hear loud noises or when they see objects that are moving fast. They know how to protect themselves from the very beginning, and they instinctively turn to their parents for protection. And so when parents remember that their babies are needing their protection from the time they are born, even before they are born, then they are going to be much better equipped to create happy families and to become happy parents themselves.
Infant mental health is understanding the development and social-emotional functioning of 0 to 3-year-olds, and working with those children and the systems that come into contact with those children to help intervene at a time that is most critical for them.
I'm looking at the relationship between the primary caregiver and the child, or the infant. And one of the reasons I got interested in this field was because I saw a lot of children in acute crises at the Children's Psychiatric Hospital. And what struck me was that they had experienced different levels of trauma. And we have a whole DSM-5 manual full of psychiatric diagnoses. But really, what it boiled down to for me was that there was difficulties between the match between the parent and the infant, and in the relationship.
So when we say babies or infant mental health, we're usually referring to the 0 to 3-year-old population. And people kind of sometimes cringe when you say 0, the babies, but from the time that they're born, even prior to birth, studies are showing that they're already experiencing, they're relating, they're taking in information from the environment, their brains are developing. So it's this kind of 0 to 3. Sometimes it's expanded to 0 to 5. So when we say babies, we're kind of that 0 to 3, 0 to 5 range.
Let's talk about the first component of these services, infant mental health teams. Across New Mexico, infant mental health teams work with infants and their parents or caregivers. The purpose of these teams is to provide infants a coordinated process for assessment and treatment in order to promote permanency planning and positive developmental outcomes. The teams support the child and their caregivers in order to enhance optimal and comprehensive developmental progress. Reduce the length of time an infant is in foster care. Reduce the maltreatment of infants. Improve the psychological health of the relationship between the infant, their biological parents, relatives, and foster parents in order to support the development of the infant in all domains.
Imagínate un niño que no tiene palabras. O sea, entonces estamos viendo el cuerpo del bebé. Yo tengo un ejemplo que es muy, muy vívido de un bebé que sufrió abuso físico muy intenso. Entonces, su capacidad de movimiento era mínima. Pensaban que no iba a poderse mover. Sin embargo, cuando el bebé estaba siendo cargado por la persona que se sospechaba, fue la persona que cometió el abuso físico. Este bebé, bueno, y lo sabemos porque grabamos las sesiones, entonces podemos verlas una y otra vez. El bebé, por ejemplo, cada vez que esta persona estaba tratando de acariciarlo, el bebé levantaba la mano pequeñito, pequeñito, pero sistemáticamente, cada vez que veía aproximar esa mano, la manito de este bebé que era de 3 meses se levantaba. Las personas que estaban observándolos veían que la persona lo cargaba y el bebé no producía ningún sonido. Entonces la interpretación tradicional era, está relajado, está tranquilo. Cuando veíamos los piececitos, los deditos de ese bebé, estaban todo el tiempo así, que no es una postura normal para un bebé de esa edad. Generalmente van a estar distendidos, incluso a pesar de que él tenía todo el daño físico que tenía. Otro detalle era cuando era cargado por esta persona, el bebé enrojecía un poco, la piel se ponía un poquito roja, pero era solo como hasta este nivel. Entonces, a menos que sepas qué buscar, no lo observas. El bebé estaba siendo cargado por esta persona y, por supuesto, si esta persona fue la que lo abusó, ese bebé no se va a mover. Va a hacer lo mínimo posible porque tiene que sobrevivir. Es uno de los múltiples indicadores que estamos observando.
We've been working really hard to train people in this early childhood evidence-based model child-parent psychotherapy that comes out of UC San Francisco. It's a very established evidence-based model, but the core of it is that we ask the questions. We don't wait for someone to sort of talk about, well, you know, when I was a kid, these things happened to me. We actually say, you know, what happened to you as a child? Let's start with the things that may have been traumatic. And it's fascinating because sometimes when you've endured a lot of trauma, you don't recognize it as trauma because it's normal to you. So if you understand that somebody who endured all this stuff doesn't see it as abnormal, it's just how life goes, and then they perpetuate it with their child, it's normative. It's not really done out of malice. But if you can start to unpack with them that actually what happened to them should never have happened. Now it did, so it doesn't go away. But let's think about the impact it had on you and what do you want for your baby? People can begin to disentangle those things with conscious thought. So the model really says, bring it on, basically, you know, and the clinician is there and will endure it with you. You know, most people want to take care of their children, but often if they have not been taken care of themselves in ways that would have nurtured and supported their development and their well-being, it's very hard to conjure that up.
The second component in infant mental health services is evidence-based practices. It's important to know that evidence-based practices are being implemented across New Mexico. Some of these include Circle of Security, a relationship-based intervention program designed to enhance attachment security between parents and children. Outcomes from this intervention include increased empathy, greater self-esteem, better relationships with parents and peers, enhanced school readiness, and an increased capacity to handle emotions more effectively when compared to children who are not secure. Child-parent psychotherapy is a relationship-based treatment for parents and infants that are designed to improve the parent-child relationship in the wake of incidents of domestic violence and trauma, maltreatment, and neglect of the child. The goal is to prevent compromised development that can later lead to maladaptation and psychopathology. These psychotherapies seek to intervene in the early life course of maltreated infants.
And I was working with one little boy who is in state's custody. He was abused and neglected, and he was in the home when his baby sister was killed. The effects of the abuse and the trauma and everything that he's seen just impacted all of his life. So from the outside looking in, he just looks like a little boy who's having trouble. He had trouble in his daycare. He would hit, he would bite. He was just having a lot of trouble in his life. So with infant mental health, we are working with him. We're working with his caregivers to try to understand that his behaviors are not him. His behaviors are how he's trying to manage everything that he's gone through in his life. What is it like for these babies? What is it like for these young children? What do they really see? What are they understanding? What is the impact of what's going on in their lives? You know, I'm only 2 years old, but I've lived in a home where I just had a mom. My dad just came and went, and a lot of the times when my dad came to visit, him and my mom would fight a lot. And sometimes I heard them fight, and sometimes I even saw them fight. And that was really scary for me. I have older siblings, and they help take care of me a lot because a lot of times my mom and dad aren't able to do that. And I'm really thankful that I have them, but it's kind of hard not to have a mommy and daddy that take care of me. And as I grew up, even though I saw all these hard things, my baby sister had it a lot worse. For some reason, they were really angry at her and didn't take care of her, and she got really hurt to the point where she even died. So I don't really understand what dying means, but I just know my baby sister's gone. And in addition to that, I'm no longer living with my mom or my dad or my sisters. I'm in this new home and I'm all alone, and I don't understand what's going on. And I just need adults who can help me understand what's going on, who know what I've been through, who are patient and help other people explain what I need now to get better. Because I am a good kid. I've just been through a lot of things, and I need people to help me.
What trauma does, it interferes with how we evaluate threats in the environment.
I always tell parents, you better believe that kid has created their own story. We think in stories. You know, there's a reason why we go to the movies and why we go to plays and why we read novels. So that child at the age of 2 has created an understanding and an explanation of what happened. And it's probably not truthful because it's a 2-year-old coming up with this story. So the process of working through infant mental health is creating a narrative, age-appropriate, truthful, with a caregiver, so that as that child grows, they can expand as they need to know more. It will fit in to what they've been told. And so they have an understanding that is really truthful of what happened. Because the danger is most kids will blame themselves. Children are egocentric. The world revolves around them, which it should, you know, but when bad things happen, it's not the child's fault. And so part of the process of therapy is letting that child know it was not your fault. And if possible, if the caregiver who was at fault is able to say, you know, I'm sorry, I did this, I messed up, it's not your fault, it can be really healing for the child.
One of the hardest responsibilities that we have is to raise children in a loving, caring way. So many things get in the way.
The great thing about infant mental health is it doesn't kick the parent out. It understands that the parent is the best hope for this baby. Because when we're all born, we have to look to somebody, that this attachment, we have to look to somebody for survival. So regardless of how skilled the parent is or what they're going through or whatever, this baby has learned that I need this parent. So as clinicians, we embrace that. We understand that we're working with this baby, but we need to also help the parents too. And sometimes that means doing specific mental health, you know, addressing their substance abuse issues or their mental health, depression, whatever it is. And a lot of times what we've learned is that connecting with the parents helps them to connect with their children. Dealing with their past hurts, their hang-ups, their working models of mistrust and, you know, the difficulties they have had. Once they have somebody understand them, then they're able to then relate to their child. It's called the parallel process, and it's an important concept in infant mental health.
I think probably, we did a lot of different things. We kind of went all over sort of all over the map. We did, the circle of security, and that kind of, it's amazing how many places that leads you in your own, parenting experience. There were tools I was missing I didn't even know were tools. I was having a lot of trouble identifying anything that wasn't like a concrete need. If he wasn't hungry or tired or wet or something and was being needy, I didn't have any idea what that meant. And so a lot of what we did with the infant mental health services was to explore that there's this whole other group of needs that are kind of less tangible and still very real to my son, but to me as, the logical person, just if I couldn't identify it, then I kind of dismissed it. And so we did a lot of work on this whole other set of needs that children have, and really that everyone has, but it was a huge moment for me to actually be handed kind of a list of other things that could be wrong besides hungry and tired and all of those things.
To stop, be patient, give him the little time that he needs to answer, if he's able to answer. And it gave us tools to, just look at him from a totally different perspective and understand that, he's not your normal child. He's not the normal child that was born in a real, loving, nurturing family. That was not his environment at all. He was born in a hostile environment.
And one of the things that we say in this work is that we're not erasing old experiences. We can't fix that, but we can create new, joyful experiences. So being able to tolerate this something new, if we can help a parent and a child begin to experience something together that is pleasurable, that sends the endorphins and their neurotransmitters get sparked to, this feels good. We can do this. We're successful. We're coming together. That is when we know that we have created a change. It's from the moment that we begin working with them to create that opportunity. And that's where the novelty is.
Every day, multiple times a day. And so there's lots of chances to practice the circle. There's also lots of chances to say, I don't really feel like doing that right now. And I just have to remind myself what a difference it makes when you see your child anticipate your reaction by going like this, you're doing something wrong. And then when, you can tell that we've gotten our relationship back where it needs to be when he pauses. And he's like, oh, okay, it's all right this time. That's all the reinforcement you really should need. And most of the time it works. But I don't know if you ever stop struggling against the influence of your own parents. I don't know, or at least I don't know if I ever will, but at least I have the tools from the circle now to recognize it and choose which route I'm going to go. And having the circle and having another set of tools that I didn't even know I needed or existed has been really, really big. It makes a measurable difference. He comes to me for comfort and stays when he needs it, where when we started with the infant mental health services, if he fell down and got scared or got hurt, he would come, but he would only stay for 5 or 10 seconds. And he would still be crying, still be upset, not really be okay again, but that was all he wanted or could handle, or I'm not sure. I think part of him probably knew when he was a baby that that's all I could handle. I had too much else going on, and that was all I was available for him was, okay, you're fine, go play, when he needed more than that. And now when he needs mommy, he comes to mommy, and more often than not, he stays with mommy until he feels better, and that is huge.
Children that have received services, these very specialized services, child parent psychotherapy or infant parent psychotherapy, what we see is that they are then able to regulate their systems, their heart rate, their breathing, so that they can then focus on playing, which is critical for development, for cognitive development, for mutual play. What's yours, what's mine? How can I work with you? How can I play with you? Which then goes into how do I function with other people? How do I function in grade school, in high school? How do I listen to my teachers? How do I develop empathy about other humans? But particularly those executive functions that we need to learn and to be contributing members of our community and our society.
When a child is supported by their caregiver and the systems around them, they develop the capacity required to be successful in a challenging world. They can begin to break the cycle of intergenerational trauma and thus increase their own health and wellness, as well as their children's. An infant who begins healing and building a secure attachment with their caregiver can be one of our most valuable assets as a community, as a state, and as a nation. The final component in infant mental health services is provider capacity building. The Children, Youth, and Families Department is investing in trainings and seminars to continue to build the internal and external clinical capacity of New Mexico providers to deliver these services. To learn more about infant mental health, visit our website at nmsoc.org and click on the COC Videos tab.
Our relationship now is a work in progress. It's better. It's much better. And I feel like I have enough tools to go forward and keep going that I can sort of let go of the things that I now know I did wrong when he was a baby. He's come so far in conjunction with his speech therapy that now that he's learned he can trust me with whatever he needs, and he's gotten to the point where he can more or less tell me what he needs, the combination of that has been really big for us. And so, it's a work in progress. We're going to keep going.
And so I think that parents, even of normal, healthy kids, don't really get it, that these kids suffered and it's still there, and that they just need support and knowledge to understand that it's there. And when you can get it early, look at the difference. Because otherwise, we know that kids will be repeaters of what was, what they've been treated. And when you get the opportunity to help them early to change or understand the different choices, better choices, you're always going to hope that they're going to make that better choice. But if they don't, it's not exposed to them and not given to them, they can never make it.